We are going to create a list app similar to an example from the book. The one in the book has a lot of extra CSS that we don't need. What the author does is includes all of the CSS for the entire chapter. Quite a bit of it we aren't going to use. The author also included a hot class that is used in the author's example, but really isn't necessary. So I removed that from my example. So I'm going to walk you through the code in my example, which is just focusing on this app and not anything extra. And so this is, I called it my list. And so here is my jQuery for my list, and then here's my CSS. And basically the only things that you should take note of in the CSS, when I add lines, they're automatically displayed in maroon, and I've got a little opacity set, which is why the text kind of looks a little grayish. And then if it's complete, and it's complete if you click on it, then the color changes and I have opacity. So it's was set to linen, which is more whitish, but with the opacity is making it look almost like a taupe color. And when it's complete, you also see the trash. And so that's kind of what you need to be aware of, because the jQuery actually manipulates the classes. So we're going to take a look at the jQuery. First thing we're going to see when we get in here is that there are several jQuery variables set up, and then there's actually a JavaScript variable. This JavaScript variable is going to be used to store text when we add a new item. The other variables are actually going to store jQuery selectors. So for list, it's storing the unordered list selector. New item form is storing the new item form ID selector, and new item button is storing the new item button ID selector. The next little section of code is going to run when the page first displays. And when it first displays, none of the line items are shown. And then they animate or fade in one line at a time. And so I'm going to reload this so you can see. So they don't display, and then they display one line at a time, and that is what this code is doing. The next little section is a function that updates the counter, and the counter displays right next to the title. And basically, it's only counting the items that are not complete. And at this point, nothing is complete. Now, if I click on one of these, it assumes it's complete, and you will see the counter change. So let me show you that. Okay, so it is actually looking at the complete class. So if the line item does not have a complete class, it's included in the length. Okay, that is stored in items, and then we are updating the code that has an ID of counter with text, and the text that we're putting in there is what we've stored in items. So if we look at our source, maybe I'll go back here. If we look, let me reload that because I changed it. We have a little span here with an ID of counter, and you'll notice there's nothing in between. This is where it is displaying the counter. Okay, so that is what is getting updated for that counter. So that's the function, and then after we create the function, we call it, so we have an initial starting value. Next thing you do is set up for new items. So by default, the new item button is going to show. The new item form, now if I click on this button, this is the new item form, okay? So by default, the new item form is hidden. which makes sense, right? And if they click on new item, then the new item button is hidden and the form is shown. So when I click on this button gets hidden and the form is displayed. Okay, that is what this little section of code is doing. And again, this is based on IDs here. So if you look over in your source code where show form is, okay, that is what is being manipulated. So at this point, you can see how the initial list looks. Then if we do click on new item and we get our little form displayed, we can add an item to our list. Okay, now when I click on add, that is basically submitting this little form. So this section of code is going to be activated, okay, because of our listener here. And the anonymous function is going to be run. And you'll notice that we are passing the event object just like we did in JavaScript. And that's because when you submit a form, there is a default action that normally occurs, and we don't want that to happen. We actually want it to run through our code. So we're going to prevent the default. And then what it's going to do is it's going to take this input text, which is Croatia, and it's going to store it in a text variable. And then we're going to use list.append to add Croatia to the bottom of our list. And you can see it's formatting the HTML here. It's taking the text Croatia, okay, and it's putting that at the bottom of the list. Then it's looking at this input area and it's blanking it out. And then we're calling update count because now we have another item that is not complete. So I'm going to click on add so you can see all of that run. So it added it to the list, updated the count. So this last little section activates. We have a listener here, and it's going to activate when we click on a line. So let me click on a line so you can see what happens. You see it jumped to the bottom, and now it displays with the little trash can. So when we click on any of these lines, we're checking for a click. We're checking to see if the line was clicked, the li element, and then it's going to run through this anonymous function. So whatever line was clicked, we are storing that in this. And then we are storing, this ends up being a Boolean. We're just saying, does this element have a class of complete, true or false? So that gets stored here. And then we're checking it. So if complete is true, okay, then we are basically setting the opacity to 0, which means it's invisible. We are adding to the padding. And what we're eventually doing here is removing it. Okay, and this is kind of done on a little delay, so it looks like it's animated. And then we're coming down here. That's if it's true, it's doing all of this, which means we actually did delete it. Otherwise, it's not been deleted. And we're still looking at the text. So this dot text, it's grabbing Italy, storing that in item. And then we are removing. And so what this happens, okay, so this gets activated. This is not true. It's not complete, so it's going to come down here. So when we click on this, you'll notice that it disappears, and then it reappears at the bottom. Okay, and that's because it's running through this code. So it stored the item, it removes it from the list. Okay, so I just clicked on London. You notice London disappeared and showed at the bottom. That's because we removed it from the initial location. And then we add it back to the list using append. And we give it a class of complete. Okay, so we're adding that item using append. That's why it shows up at the bottom. We added the class of complete. That CSS changes the color. And then we basically hid it so it could be faded in. So I'll do another one so you can kind of see. It kind of blinks. It removes it, blinks, and kind of shows it at the bottom. And then, of course, we update count because now we only have 2 items that aren't complete. So if I come up here and I click on this, then it's actually going to run through this little section. Okay, so you could see the opacity go to 0. Let me do it again. That's when the line displays black. And you could kind of see it sliding across. Okay, so that was padding left plus 180 with the line displaying black. I'll do it again so you can kind of see what happens. Goes to black and you can see Paris start to move across. And then it actually removes the item once this little animated section is done. So that is the bucket list with the bucket list code. Now there is a much easier way of accomplishing the same task, and the next video will show you how to do that code.